Hello, everyone. Thanks, Clay. That was beautiful. I hold to my first opinion, Don Henley. If I just heard that, I would think that was a Don Henley song on the radio. That's a great song. Well, we are coming to the last two statements from the cross, and I am so glad that we've been able to take this journey together. It's the first time I've actually taught through the 7 words since I finished the book, and so it's I taught it a couple of years ago here, and it is definitely not the same series. When you have time to think through something as deeply and to try to connect it, the fact that my book is a combination of like literary memoir and theological reflection, that was the biggest goal for me, was how does this actually, who cares what he says if it doesn't actually connect with my life? Does the gospel have anything to say to our lives? And not just our present, and not even just to the hope of a future, because the gospel's got to be a lot more than just getting out of hell and getting into heaven. But what does the gospel actually say to our whole existence, to our past, to our present, and our future? And to explore the words, and my answer to that question is, does it? Is with a resounding yes. That the gospel of grace, when we allow the Word of God to permeate our hearts and to draw us into the presence of the living Christ, it actually gives us the strength and the courage to enter into our narratives, to enter into our stories, and actually find, even when our lives maybe are marked by a lot of difficult or painful things. I was talking with my mom today, whether she's gone through just rough back surgeries, and it's isolating to try to heal up. This is her second major surgery, and this is not an easy thing to go through. Where's God in the midst of that? When we stay rooted in the gospel, it allows us to truly be able to say, not my will, but thy will be done. But more importantly, it helps us to actually find what I call the pinpoints or intersections of grace. It's attuning our hearts and our minds and reorienting our vision so that we can actually begin to see God and how active he actually has been in our lives, that he's always been there. That when Jesus said, I will never leave you nor forsake you, that's not a hyperbolic statement. That's reality. It's the ultimate reality. And when we live with that reality, my greatest discovery in writing this book was that when I went back into the traumatic events that shaped me as a child and plagued me as an adult and haunted me in ministry because I hadn't dealt with them, when I was willing to actually go back into them, not as someone that's, analyzing oneself, but how do I go back into it with Jesus? And reinterpret my past through the lens of the gospel. And all of a sudden, the first pass, the memoir pieces, it was little Josh, bad things happened to Josh, and I just need to get it down on paper. When I went back into it with the gospel in mind, and I went back into it with a pastoral lens, all of a sudden I saw that I'm no longer allowed to play the victim. And that there were things that happened to me that were horrible. Children shouldn't have to go through sexual abuse. They shouldn't have to feel all alone in the world. They shouldn't have to grow up without their dads. They shouldn't have to have their mama have to work 2 jobs to support 3 boys. There's a lot of things, children shouldn't grow up in utter poverty and be so aware that you're buying candy with food stamps when everyone else is buying it with real money. Those sorts of things that can really impact us. It's like all these things that I could have easily been like, lots of bad things happened to me, but I toughed through it. I got through it. No, that's not the key. The real key was, Lord, everything that happened to me came from people that had things happen to them. And that we're a continuation of the same old narrative, which is we're people created in the image of God, and we have taken that image and we have thrown it in the mud. And when God brings us back into what I call the beatific vision, where we can once again see the beauty of who Jesus is and know that he has not forsaken us, but that he has actually pursued us, and that no matter how deep of a hole we've dug for ourselves, no matter how deep our sin goes, that his love goes deeper still. That is a profound, like, psychological reckoning. Because what it did for me is it showed me that, like the story I read about my stepdad, which is, by the way, not my stepdad who's here with my mom. I would never tell that story if he was still my stepdad. But I actually have a tremendous amount of grace for that stepdad. He was my stepdad for a huge portion of all my formative years, junior high through my senior year. And there was much that I am so grateful for. And he was living out his own brokenness in trying to be a dad to, like, he got new kids who were already in junior high. That's a weird thing, you know? And so all these ways of, like, looking at the young woman that I experienced abuse at her hands, I am positive that at her age, it had to have been something she was repeating that had been done to her. And when we begin to actually consider this reality that everybody will be a victim, everybody will be a victimizer, and that's why the gospel is so important. And why the statement we're going to consider tonight is so crucial to our understanding of who Jesus is. And this is the sixth statement from the cross. And we begin with John 19, verse 30. And this is the cross of the end and the beginning. When Jesus had received the sour wine, he said, "It is finished." And he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. Now we'll see tomorrow there's actually a seventh word. Luke records Jesus actually saying after this word, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." But this particular statement, this statement of completion, it's incredible when you actually think about a statement like this. That, as I was talking about earlier, our lives tend to be marked by incredible frustration, even for those that achieve the greatest things to the human mind. Leonardo da Vinci, a man who achieved so much. I think it's something like 85% of his work is incomplete. Coleridge, who's considered one of the greatest poets of the Romantic period, at least, completed less than 10% of his poetry. In fact, people often talk about his scattered, like he might have been like a poster child for ADHD before it happened, And it's like it's what I call those people in history that are marked by what we would call frustrated genius. It's like the genius is there, but there's other things at play that actually prevent them from ever fulfilling or being all that they could be. I feel like that defines my whole existence. Is that this constant? I don't think I'm a genius. That's actually, I should qualify that statement. But I feel like I'm walking frustrated potential. Like I know what I'm capable of, but I'm actually not, because I'm 50 and I'm still struggling with the same things. And you make a little bit of progress, and then you fall down again, and you get frustrated. And that's just part of, my plague is literally that everything interests me. Everything interests me. And when I say everything, I bought my friend Steve a book today that I love so much by this guy named Benjamin Labutat, one of my favorite new authors from Chile, called When We Cease to Understand the World. And it was the first novel that I read, a historical fiction novel, kind of a new category. It was like one of the top 10 books in the New York Review of Books for 2021. And it goes through the great scientific minds of the 20th century. And it delves into quantum mechanics, and it delves into chemistry and all these things. You know what I did at the end of that book? I bought, my wife's like, "Why did you order books on advanced math when you didn't even get through algebra in school?" I'm like, because I feel like it's something that I could do now. She's like, you need to pick your battles, buddy. it's like I ordered 7 books on quantum mechanics. I'm like, I think maybe I need to go back to school and become a physicist. It's like everything stinking interests me, and it's a curse when everything interests you, because you can only do so many things. And so it becomes plagued. I refer to myself as a walking unfinished event. And I'm also cursed with a near perfect recall on everything I take in, and most of it is absolutely useless and meaningless. Darcy's like, anytime we go for a drive, I'll just have some stinking, stupid, random fact like come into my mind about anything, any conversation, any topic, and she's like, "Why do you know that?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I don't want to know that." It's what I refer to myself as a data mystic, which is really just a curse. It's a man who is plagued with useless information running through his brain at all times. In fact, I connect so fully with the words of another pointless point, the Portuguese poet, because everybody reads poets from Portugal, and he is one of my favorites, Fernando Pessoa. In his book, The Book of Disquiet, which was discovered after he died in a chest, he didn't hardly release anything in his life. Once again, frustrated potential, and he's Portugal's national treasure, actually, probably the greatest writer of the 20th century. He wrote this line, and it just has stuck with me. "My past is everything I have failed to be." I'm like, man, that one hurts. Like, you kind of have to think about it for a second. He also had another line, something like, "I always feel like someone is beating me over the head with my own arms." He's a real encourager. The way that I deal with my chaos is I like to read books by people that are crazier than me because, there's always someone worse, and that's how we feel good about ourselves. So the reason I share all that is because this statement is a statement that stands outside of the human condition and yet happened within the fully human condition of the God-man. "It is finished" means exactly what he meant. That everything that needs to be done in regards to human redemption has been accomplished. The work that Jesus came to do, he did it, and he did it to its full. There was nothing that can be added to it. It is a work of true perfection. And this is something that is so extraordinary. When we say it is finished, it doesn't mean that it's over. It just means that it's perfect. In fact, it is finished, but for us, it's not over yet. And so what we are called to be is a people that learn how to rest in the perfect finished work of Jesus. But here's the problem. It is a source of both humiliation and hope. Look at this verse. This is one of those verses that creates a source of humiliation and hope. "You, therefore, must be perfect." Notice the absolute aggressiveness of that statement. You must be perfect, as your heavenly Father is perfect. Matthew 5 is the last verse of chapter 5. It actually is the verse that caused me to come to faith. And don't think that I came to faith because I was like, "Sweet, I'm in, Lord, because that's me. Perfect." No, that's not. That's far from it. In fact, it was the absolute ridiculousness of that statement and the paradoxical nature of it that drove me to my knees one night in my Seattle apartment. And it was that word, that phrase, because I remember my mom's Bible in my hand, and I'm like, I am going to throw this thing out the stinking window right now. That's impossible. This is impossible. And it was in that moment that the Lord, it was one of those few moments in my life that was like a supernatural illumination, an intervention, if you will, that Jesus was saying to me by his Spirit, that's exactly right. It's an impossible possibility. And that impossible possibility is that you can't be perfect, but you can be with me in me and me in you. And when I'm with you, when I'm covering you, and when you're in me, the Father sees my perfection, Josh. And when I'm in you, I work perfectly through your imperfection. Your incompleteness is the exact kind of vessel that I want, because I choose the foolish things of the world to confound the wise. And you see, when we begin to understand that we cannot add to what Jesus has already done, it creates a sense of levity around existence. It creates a lightness of being. I was having a great conversation yesterday with one of the couples here, and we were talking about that. Like, I was a guy that was always plagued with self-consciousness, never feeling like what I did was good enough, always worried about, and I was sharing with them, I was like, something happened when I hit 50. 45 to 50 was really rough years for me. I really struggled with aging. I didn't like it. It was like, and I think COVID really put that at a new level, because I had to look at myself on a camera every week. Like, you know what it's like to stare into a camera and film yourself, and you see yourself on the monitor, and I'm like, who's that old man? Because that's not me. I'm young. I have vitality still. I want to think of myself, it's just this full of energetic, young, stallion-like life. And I hate that when my wife's like, she's like, oh my gosh, that guy, my wife, we were watching a trailer, and my daughter, 17, my wife, they literally paused this trailer 5 times because this guy in the trailer is so beautiful. And they kept rewinding it. And even I was like, yeah, he's stinking beautiful. The guy's crazy. Wait, let me see his six-pack again. That's not real. There's no way that's real. And I was like, dang. And then the girls, and I'm like, honey, he's young enough to be your son. And she's like, you just look at him. He's virile. And I'm like, if a man said that about a young girl, it's not okay. I don't know why you can say it, but she can, because she's a woman. And even I was like, yeah, that guy's beautiful. He's a picture of youthful beauty, the supreme picture of life at its absolute best. And it represents our sad obsession as a culture with our worship of youth. And my wife was just teasing me. But here's the thing. All of that to say is that when I come up against the inevitable bell-shaped curve, my own limitations, the realization that sometimes we're constantly chasing after the best is still yet to come, and then you get to a certain age and you're like, oh, darn it, it's actually already passed me by. And it's like, because I've been so busy chasing what's next, I actually have missed out on what's right here. If you can understand this, especially you younger people in this room, if you can understand what is finished, what has been completed by Jesus is truly complete, is finished, and you can't add to it, and your satisfaction and your rest will be found in nothing else other than Him. If you can actually live with an awareness of that, you will be able to enjoy life in ways that most people are not able to. And see, I'm grateful that I met Jesus at 27, because I would be lying to say that my life hasn't been anything other than an absolute gift since I met Christ. And yes, there has been unbelievably hard things. 8 months of severe anxiety that crippled me and almost hospitalized me. Moments where I didn't think our marriage was going to survive the pressures of ministry. Times when I thought the church was going to blow up. Times where I started developing unhealthy patterns that could have put me on the edge of disqualification because of just almost a desire. I was so overwhelmed that I almost wanted to sabotage my ministry. I wanted to do something that could because I didn't know how to quit. So maybe if I just got myself fired, then I can go do something else. I've had those moments where I've wanted to escape, but when I actually look at the history and I see the perfect Jesus always there, always willing to leave the 99 to find the one, always willing to bring me back again and again to my first love. Man, I wouldn't give up my life didn't begin until I met Jesus. I was a kid that, a lot of people say their glory days were high school. High school were the worst years of my life. Junior high and high school were the worst years of my life. You know what it's like to be the last kid in your whole town to go through puberty? I mean, this is not a fun thing. When you're the kid that likes to dance and sing in a rural farming sports town, like I just was inviting abuse. So, all of these things. And now I just feel so much freedom to dance all the time. And so I wrote this dance for you guys. No, I'm just joking. I'm just like, I just like river dance off the stage and then I'm gone. I wish I could river dance. That'd be an amazing way to end a sermon. I just like it when they don't move their upper bodies. They're just like, that's perfection. You can't add to that. Nope. Remember the River King? That guy. I haven't seen him in a while. That tan, that blonde hair, that bandana. Whew. Our humiliation is that when we come up against the perfection of Christ, we are confronted with our lostness. And this is why, for us, we have to understand that the greatest threats to our walk with Christ does not come from outside of us. They come from within. Because there's something so profoundly comforting about the words, "It is finished," but there is also something deeply offensive by it. Because it means literally what it says. You can't add to what Jesus has done. You can't help him save you. You can't do that. It's the rule of the Christian life, and it's so contrary to everything we know in our human experience that it's something that it overwhelms us. Because I'm like, Lord, there's got to be something in me that's savable. There's got to be something in me that's of value. And Jesus would say to me, as he would say to you, you are of value. Amen. But I don't want this or that thing from you. I remember telling my father, he's like, I feel, I'm worried about where I'm at because I'm like, I know, Dad, you're worried because you still drink and you still smoke and you're like, I need to give those things up. It is funny that we always feel like we got to lay something down for Jesus. Like I'm going to give up this thing for Jesus. I'm going to do this thing for Jesus. And listen, Jesus doesn't want this or that thing from you. He just wants you. And the you includes the crappy parts and the good parts. Not to use inappropriate slang. My wife hates it. And I don't usually even say that word, but it's true. He wants the worst and the best of you. He wants the stupid parts of you, and he wants the smart parts of you. He just wants you. And I think that when we try to give him our best side, I sometimes think like we, as Christians, like it's like we act like we're on a, that in the early dating process, and you're just doing the best you were making sure you're the cleanest you've ever been, that you smell better than you've ever smelled, and that your hair is more fixed when you first start dating the person that you fall in love with. It's like, all those things, I'm just putting the best foot forward. And then I know, because I do counseling all the time, and then it's like, they get married, and it's like, this is not what he was like when we were dating. I'm like, come on, you fell for that? Seriously, did your parents not talk to you about this? It's like that's on you. Yeah, you just need to sit in it for your whole life. That's reality. It's like, but we can't. There's no fronts with Jesus. There's no pretense. There's no secrets with him. It's finished. It's already done. When I first got saved, I was so fearful that I wasn't actually saved that I think I prayed to receive the Lord like 100 times in the first year. It didn't help because there were some pastors I listened to that made me always afraid that I wasn't saved. But I mean, I remember I led a guy to the Lord like 2 months after I got saved. And he asked me, he was a producer, and I tell him, because I'm excited. Whatever I'm excited about, I tell people about. I got excited about Jesus, I start telling people about Jesus. And I, that's just my personality. It's all or nothing. So I'm telling him this, I just go for it. And I tell this producer, I'm like, dude, I came to faith in Jesus. And he's like, really? Well, tell me about that. And I'm like, this is what I've come to believe. And he's like, my girlfriend, we were going to get married, and she just moved out. She left me, and I just don't know what to do. I feel lost. And I'm like, dude, you need Jesus. And he's like, I think you're right. And we talked we were working for 2 weeks in the studio. So we talked every day for about 3 or 4 days. And then I was at his house, and he goes, I'm ready. What do I need to do? I want to receive Jesus. And I was like, oh, darn. I'm like, man. And I'm not joking. I said this to him. I'm like, all right, here's the thing. I don't totally know. What I've been told is that you pray this prayer and you receive it that Jesus would come into your heart. And I know it sounds, and he was like so open. He's like, okay. And I'm like, but here's the thing. I've prayed this prayer quite a few times because I'm still not totally sure it works. But I'm gonna pray it again anyway. So why don't you just pray it with me? And he's like, dude, let's do it right now. And so we prayed to see Jesus. I'm like, how do you feel? And he's like, man, I feel so much peace right now. And I'm like, oh, that's good. That's good. I think this is working. I think it's working. Who knew that I would become an evangelist? I'm like selling people on Jesus when I'm not even sure I've got the product yet. And so, but that's that overwhelming sense of and the reason I was so worried and I wasn't sure and why I kept praying to receive Jesus is because I didn't understand that everything that needs to be done has already been done. Grace was too foreign. It was too baffling. What do you mean? He loves me because it's his nature to love me. I mean, who does that? We live in a world where love is contingent. But that's not how Jesus is. And so I think that when I look, I look at the power of the gospel, I think it is important for us to understand that there is humiliation because it is a hard thing to be continually confronted with your own impotence. But that is what we are. The only thing that you brought to the table when it comes to your salvation is your sin and yourself. Really, I would say the only thing you can bring to the table any day is your sinful self. And the thing that makes you a saint is that your sinful self has surrendered to the perfect Christ. And so it is his perfection that we rely on, nothing in us. That's why Paul says God did not choose many who are wise. He didn't choose many of influence, but he chose the foolish things. And this is why I always get mad when people are like, the reason the people are responsive to the gospel in prison is because, they're broken. I'm like, wait a minute, what are we talking about right now? Because that's the only way anybody receives the gospel. Yes, it's true. Prison ministry is extremely fruitful because these are people who have externally lived out what's going on in most of our hearts. All of us have the same issues. Theirs just played out significantly beyond the heart into a way that got them incarcerated. And that incarceration has led them to the loss of everything that they cared about. And when they lost everything that they cared about, they realized that everything that they had given their lives to actually wasn't quite as meaningful as they thought. And so, yes, there is an openness due to the fact that they have nothing, nowhere to go but up. But that's the only way to come to Christ ever. You can't come to Christ until you come to the end of yourself. Our humiliation is that we can't begin until we come to our end. Listen, here's the thing that you have to offer to Jesus. There's only one thing that you have to offer to Jesus, and that is your dead self. But here's the good news. Dead things seems to be his cup of tea. If I could borrow, if I can borrow from Capone, and dead things seem to come alive when they're in the presence of Jesus. He's in the business of bringing dead things to life. And that's what you and I were. And that's what you and I continue to bring is ourselves. We die every day. Every day we present ourselves a living sacrifice. Lord, and every day you will fight the tendency to prove to Jesus your worth instead of accepting his. And this is just the nature of life on this side of eternity, and it's actually the tension that creates the stumbling. It's our humiliation and our hope. His perfection is a reminder that we are so imperfect, but his perfection is also the only thing that can get us through the day. So this is the paradox. But yeah, our end and our beginning. Look at this. Look at this verse. Looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. Hebrews 12:2. Looking to Jesus, the author and the perfecter of our faith. It's so interesting. I was talking with the guys that came this morning about a faith that works. And as I was talking about faith, I was sharing with them a series of definitions of faith that I think are really helpful. That faith is a disposition toward God that allows God the right to be God in and through us. That if I could borrow the words of Karl Barth, that faith is allowing Jesus to be for me, in me, and through me everything I cannot be for myself. Major Ian Thomas says that faith is allowing the Holy Spirit to fill you with the adequacy of Christ. Those are all beautiful definitions. Notice the active reality of the passive receiving. There's an active receptivity. I must receive by faith the Jesus who Jesus is the perfection. So any perfection of faith is not the thing that saves us. It's the object of our faith that saves us. We exercise faith just like we exercise worship every day in all things. So this statement about Jesus, we're looking to Jesus. We're not looking to the new fad. You know, isn't it interesting? Christians love fads just like the rest of the world. When I first got saved, when I first went on tour and was touring full time, that was the year of The Purpose-Driven Life. Wonderful, great book. I don't have an issue with that book. What I had an issue with is when I would go to churches as a new Christian, and that would be the book on the pulpit and not the Bible. Because remember, then they did the Purpose-Driven Church, and then there were the 40 Days of Purpose, and then all these churches were like, everybody's going to get their purpose. And it's just a purpose-filled Christianity in America, and it was like, that was like the thing, and then it wasn't the thing. And then remember the prayer of Jabez? Like, how did we fall for that one? That's amazing to me. Even I, who hadn't even read my Bible all the way through, knew that there was no way that an obscure prayer in the Old Testament was the key to unlocking the treasure troves of heaven. Because if that was so, that would have been the prayer that Jesus taught the disciples to pray. It was like, no, that's the whole thing is, he wanted you to find it because that's how you find treasures is you got to find it. No, it's an obscure prayer in the Old Testament that's 3 lines long is not going to be man, I found this prayer and since I prayed it, I've made millions. Like, really? That's not how it works. And praise God that it doesn't. I mean, that's so ridiculous to me. But we love, just like the world, we're always looking for the silver bullet to satisfaction. The newest trend, my favorite in the last 5 years, is definitely Enneagram. That one's the funniest to me. How many of you guys know what Enneagram is? But there's a lot of you that don't know. What a gift. You know what? I'm not going to ruin that for you. I'm not even going to tell you. Don't even look it up. Don't even remember. Don't write that down. Lord, remove that from their minds. I think I remember the forgetful spell from Harry Potter. All that to say, these trends, and this particular trend became very big with millennial Christians. And I knew churches, I had friends. I actually railed on one of my dearest friends who's a pastor who preached on it. And I'm like, are you crazy? You're teaching a personality test from the pulpit that's got an upside down pentagram for a symbol, and you don't even understand its background. And it's like, it's so Gnostic in its origin. It's so built on this, like, now you have secret knowledge to understand yourself. And all it did for young people was just give them an excuse for bad behavior. It's like, I am convinced that the only reason that kids in the church got into Enneagram is because their parents didn't let them celebrate Halloween or read Harry Potter. That's the only reason. It's like, oh my gosh, this is my opportunity to dabble in the occult. It's like, I'm like, stop it. We don't need anything. It's not Jesus plus anything. We don't need a new gospel. And the only reason kids are bored in the church today is because we stopped preaching the gospel. So I don't put that on young people. I put that on the preachers who fell into the trap that we need something different than what we've been preaching. No, it is new every day. If anyone be in Christ, new creation. The old is gone, the new has come. It's why we can read the same Bible verse a million times, and every time some new discovery. It's why I actually find great life even in preaching the same messages, because I don't ever preach the same message, because there needs to be space for the Holy Spirit to bring new life, and there's a sensitivity. What does God have to say to this people, to this group right now? And I'm not saying I don't prepare, because I always tell preachers, like, don't do that. Don't just say, like, I'm just going to trust you, Jesus. Like, that's not how preaching works. But the fact is that there is a freshness to the gospel when we believe it and when we embody it and when we come expectant to meet with Jesus through it, because it's done. We can't add to it. He is the end. He is the end, and he is the beginning. His death is the end of a particular era. C.S. Lewis said that when Christ was crucified on the cross, it was the moment in which time literally took like a left turn. Like everything changed. And the gospel isn't actually comparable to anything else. It's not like it's a continuation of the same thing. It is something altogether new, and he is the firstborn over a new creation. There is a mosaic to atonement that is so rich and so beautiful, many facets that play into the perfection of Jesus. He is the new representative man. He fixes what the first Adam did wrong. He becomes the one for the many and the one. He is the substitution. He takes the place of the sinner. He takes the judgment of the sinner into himself. He is also Christus Victor. He is the victor over sin, death, and the dominions of darkness. Churches have focused, different churches and different denominations and movements throughout under the umbrella of Orthodoxy have focused on different elements of the cross, but the perfection of Jesus actually includes all of those things. Substitution, new creation, new humanity, victory. All of this is wrapped up in his work. And this is, our life is found. I always say that when Jesus, if you look at all of the things that Jesus uses to describe himself in John, there's, it's funny, 7 words from the cross, but in John, there's also 7 I am statements. And each one, it just shows us that Jesus he's the beginning of our faith journey. He's the nourishment on that journey. He is himself the path for the journey. He's the guide on the path, and he's the goal. He's the goal. This is our end and our beginning. Sin, I think, is written into the fabric of history collectively and personally. And it is anchored in what I refer to as the archetypal story of Babel. And it's evidenced, and I want to just focus in on this for a second because it's a huge theme of my book, which is the problem with ladder theology. And I want to define that because this statement unravels, dismantles, it pulls the block out of the Jenga tower so that it can collapse. But it's this endless and exhausting game of chutes and ladders, our attempts to build to the heavens. And the thing is, what's fascinating about humanity, and especially collective sin, which is something that is becoming more and more of a deep-rooted problem with globalization, is that we actually are capable of doing incredible feats when we work together. This is why cities will always be a type of Babylon. All cities. All major cities are a type of Babylon. And what I mean by that is cities tend to be the place where people go to be their own gods. It's a place where humanity shows the world what it can do without God. That's what cities are. I used to have this idealistic idea that God saves cities, and he does not. He saves people. And he sends people to cities because he loves people, and there's people in cities. But cities are often difficult places for ministry because cities tend to draw this deep kind of self, especially American cities like this. It's like the place where you go to make a name for yourself. You know what I did the day after I graduated from high school? I moved out of my hometown, and I never moved back. And it's like I spent 10 years in Seattle. I spent 2 years in the wilderness in Southern California, Inland Empire, and then Portland. But I am an urban guy like through and through. I love cities. The older I get, the more I like rural. I hate the suburbs. And I know some of you live there, and praise God, everybody's got to love something. I don't judge you for it. I used to. I used to judge real hard. In fact, I became I've actually got known as being the mean pastor in Portland who would tell people, if you don't live in the city proper, do not come back to my church. And I remember one Sunday we lost 300 people the next week. It was the best reduction ever. Because here's the thing, is we were filling up with voyeurs. Why? Who cares if you have a full church in Portland if everyone that goes there doesn't live in Portland? It's like, so all that does is create the false belief that I'm effectively doing ministry in an unchurched city, when in actuality, I'm not reaching anybody in that city because I got a bunch of commuters coming. It's not that I have an issue with people in the suburbs. I did it wrong. What I should have done is planted a church in the suburbs because I needed those people to support what we were doing in the city. So I literally needed your money. If you were one of those people, I needed your money. Because I was left with every stinking barista in Portland, and they don't give much. We went from getting pretty good offerings to all of a sudden I would regularly find a joint in the offering box. This is Portland, Oregon. I'm like, well, looks like we're reaching the people now, because I don't think anybody that was coming from the suburbs would put a joint in our offering box. And so, but the reality is the city is this place that becomes very representative of that human effort and the incredible things that we can accomplish. But it's also such a picture. It's why it's also the source of much of the cultural depravity. It's the centers of alternative lifestyles. It's the place where people have saying, I don't need God. I have my own kind of church here. And it's why people that don't live in cities are so frustrated as voters, because the cities always seem to dominate what happens in your legislation. I mean, there's all sorts of things. But all that to say, it all points to humanity's unwillingness to admit its inability to reach perfection. And we as Christians know that. This is why why we do need churches in this city, but I'm just we just need churches. We need healthy churches everywhere, and we need to care about the mission of God, and we need to believe Jesus when he says go and be obedient when he says go into all the world and bring the gospel. And that's why I am not going to feel bad when I do eventually move out of that city. I'm not going to feel bad about it. It's going to happen eventually. Even maybe while I'm I've done my time. I might move to Sauvie Island while I pastor Dorvo because it's just beautiful. So I think that this is something that we need to understand. That if Jesus is the end and the beginning, then that means he's everything in between as well. And when we travel with him in his perfection, we can actually endure the challenges of being in Babylon. We can endure the difficulties and the cultural ups and downs because we know the end of the story, and we know that what needs to be done has already been done. If he's completed the work, like the rest we're just waiting the culmination of that finished work. That finished work is still working itself out in redemptive history. And there will be a day, this is the coolest thing. You guys ever thought about this? There will be a day when the perfection of Jesus' work has reached the last one. There will be a day when one person will be the final person to come to Jesus. Wouldn't it be sick if you were the one that led that person to the Lord? Like the last one. You lead someone to the Lord, they pray with you, and then poof, everyone's just with Jesus. And you're like, I got the golden ticket. And then, and you know what Jesus will say? It was already done. Like, you didn't do that. See? Because even that, you'd want to take credit for it. You'd be like, I knew there was a reason for my existence. He needed me. If it wasn't you, it would have been someone else. But I kind of like the idea of I'm like, I want to lead the last person in. That would be amazing. Every time I pray with someone, it actually crosses my mind, what if this is the one? And then it doesn't happen, and I'm like, I don't know if you're really saved. Because I think if you would have gotten saved, we would have all gone to heaven right now. Let me close with this. I've clearly taught too much this week. I've said many things that maybe need to be scratched from this teaching. So, especially, I'm not even going to say it again because my wife would already be horrified at me bringing her into the conversation. But you know what? She's not here, and that's the best time to talk about your significant other. Our surrender and victory. I glorified you on earth, and having accomplished the work that you gave me to do. This is the completion in all of its fullness. I've glorified you on earth, Jesus prayed. He's already, notice, once again, it's the future present, or the present future. He's already, the high priestly prayer of John 17 is actually a picture of the prayer life, I believe, of the resurrected, glorified King. He's giving, the way that he prays is as if he's like, I finished the work, I'm ready to return to the glory that I've had. And then he gives us this incredible insight, this idea that the Spirit and Jesus both, that it takes two persons of the Godhead to interpret our dumb prayers, but that he's an advocate on our behalf. And I love this. I've accomplished the work that you gave me to do. And here Jesus is once again reminding us there's nothing left for him to do that hasn't been done. It's done. And when we actually recognize that leaves us with one real possibility, and that is the surrender of our lives, even the difficulties that we might be experiencing. We just surrender it to Jesus. And when we surrender it to Jesus, what we begin to do is to find that we are not working toward victory, we're working from it. That we're working from it. What a beautiful picture. You know, this is not an easy thing to learn, though, because we often think that we're working toward a goal when in actuality we're working from a finished work. One of my favorite books of all time, Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace, there's a character in that book who makes this statement: the truth will set you free, but not until it's finished with you. And I've always really loved that. So it's like there is this push and pull reality of like whoever the Son of Man sets free shall be free indeed. But what happens is we don't understand that freedom, and so there has to be a coming to an understanding of the finished reality of Christ's work for that freedom to truly allow us to enter into the victory and continue to persevere and to push through the difficulty, to push through what feels like those impossible spaces where I can't take another step. I can't do this for another day. I can't endure this. And when we actually begin to rely on Jesus, I think it's in that moment when you come to that conclusion, I can't do this, is when Jesus is actually getting somewhere with you. And it's like it's a hard thing. I think our our natural giftings, our natural cleverness, or the things that we do have that are positive in our personalities can be a positive impediment when we actually rely on those things. And this is why sometimes the Lord has to bring us to a place of humility through the school of humiliation. Because we're not learning to rest in his finished work, because we still deep down feel like we've got to be adding something to it. We've got to be adding something to it. I want to close with just a little story. And then I was going to ask Clay, hey Clay, how would you feel if I shared that new song I wrote this morning with everyone? You guys want to hear a new song when I'm done? Okay, I'm gonna close with this story because I feel like I've said enough about it is finished, and I'm convinced that if I keep speaking, I'm going to say something I really regret. I just feel that in my soul tonight. The Lord's like, careful, boy, careful. And you guys still come up and do the closing worship because I'm going to finish early. So, okay, here it is. October 2021. It's a crisp and clear fall day. Evening was approaching, and the sky out our kitchen window displayed varying shades of orange, lavender, and pink, which stood out against the technicolor green of the verdant landscape. My phone sat on the counter before me as I visited with Darcy. It was silenced but vibrating. His name appeared on the screen. Al. Dad. It was the third call in 2 days. Darcy looked down at the phone and then at me. I knew what was coming and glanced over my shoulder to the quickly darkening sky to hide my discomfort. Honey, are you going to answer this time? I couldn't do it. I promise I'll call him before I go to bed. That decision, as with so many over the years, was avoidance under the guise of good intentions. As I lay in bed, I listened with a dull ache in my chest to that sad and familiar voice. It was marked by his usual economy of language, a 12-word request accompanied by his unusual addition of S's to words when he drinks, which creates the illusion of an accent. Yeah, Joshua, it's your dad. Give me a call when yous can, okays? Bye. Then I heard a shuffling sound followed by a click. I saved it. He communicates so much through so little. His few words flowed from a lonely space. He was commandeered by a body whose incompleteness acted like a death grip on his heart and a hammer blow on his mind. I want to be very careful to not leave the impression that I have figured out the key to conquering one's childhood traumas. We cannot forget the principle of mixture. I may have a strong mental grasp of what the gospel is and believe in it deeply, but can I honestly say I know the truth if it is not loved and lived? What is heartbreaking about my relationship with my dad is that though we have made much progress over the last 10 years, I still find myself selfishly avoiding him and he me. I know my dad is dying, sitting in his mildew-infested, smoke-stained cabin, unbathed, barely sleeping, drinking and smoking, finding relationships with shows that are as absent from the collective mind today as he is. He does have a roommate now, who I am sure is nearly as dysfunctional as my father. Still, I am relieved he is not alone, but I'm not there. I haven't seen him since before the pandemic, and I haven't talked to him in 3 months. When he gets depressed, he stops answering his phone and stops calling. It's a vicious cycle. Darcy finds my inaction unbearable and protests often, having lost so many that are dear to her. She says, honey, I don't want you to have regrets. You're all he has, and he needs you. Please call your dad before you get the call he's gone. Gone? That's the problem. He was never there, and I needed him. Then the cold logic of my memory wounds crumble, because he is up there in that coming Alaskan darkness that stunts the soul like the permafrost stunts the trees. But still I can't do it, so I tell myself I'll call him tomorrow. I sometimes wonder if procrastination, like the writing of this book, is ever laziness for me, or is it the suffering of past trauma that produces the agony of the act? All I know is it's too much, the drunken repetition, the fragmented nostalgia. But that's not really the problem either. The cold in my soul flows from the fact that I can't fix him. Actually, I think it's deeper still. I'm as afraid of his looming death as he is, and I can hardly handle the death in his voice, the forced breathing, the rattle in his cough, the extinguished vitality. But most of all, it's the thought of losing him, my stranger father. What is once and for all with Jesus must be played out in real time for us, and it can seem as impossible as life itself. But that's the point, isn't it? Life is terminally impossible. And I know the strength I need will not be achieved by my own willpower. The fact is, I have no power to will, and it doesn't matter because I can't stop what in our modernity we have learned to deny so fully, death. As Philip Larkin wrote with such unsettling honesty in his great poem, Abad, courage is no good if it means not scaring others. Being brave lets no one off the grave. Death is no different whined at than withstood. What I need, what we all need, is the reminder that even though Jesus has not extinguished the pain of this human comedy, he has permanently dismantled death's finality and promises to carry us through it. I can surrender to the gentle grace of Jesus, and in the power of the Spirit, I can walk through the shadow of death with Dad. God's will must be my rule, and if his desire is that all people be saved, I can leave that mystery with him. I can be a witness, but I can no more save Alexander or anyone for that matter than I can prevent his death. But I can call him, love him, and remind him in his bullheadedness that he is divinely loved. I can comfort him in his suffering, be patient with him in his brokenness, and walk with him through the valley of the shadow of death as we stumble toward eternity together. The victory cry of Jesus on the cross changed everything forever. Death will not have the last word. It may be finished, but for us here and now, it is not over yet. All right, let me see if I can remember this song. So I woke up this morning, and this song was just, it kind of was like in my head, and I don't have this happen very often, but it was just like a song that just came to me, and like, it was like I was dreaming it or something. That's usually a good sign for me. It's called Because of You.
Do you mind if we record this, or would you prefer we don't?
Oh man, if you record, no, yeah, it's fine. It's totally fine. Man, you really play that guitar like low slung, like rock and roll style. I used to play it like that, but now I'm a little. Yeah, thank you. I was going to do that. Okay, check. I just sing it to you a cappella. That would make a ton of sense. All right. I literally played it like 3 times, so if I don't make it through it, I don't know that you'll know because you've never heard it before. So. Sorry. Hey, can you do a huge favor for me? Can you shorten this strap in the back for me? Is that possible? Does it? For my brother. Oh, man, thanks. I literally can't reach the cord. I have little short arms like my legs. Thank you. That's good. That's perfect. Yeah. Oh, that's perfect. Yes. I'm more like the Beatles. Like I like it like right here. Yeah. No, that's great. Yeah, thank you so much. Because of you, my eyes are open to the one who says I'm spoken for. Because of you, forgiveness reigns. Because of you, I'm not afraid. Because of you, death's lost its sting. I died with you, risen like a spring. Because of you, I know the truth. Because in you, all things are new. Ooh, because of you. Though life is a struggle, and I stumble all the way, You'll never leave me, and your love will remain. Shadows fade in your light, in your joy I found strength. And I'm amazed because of you. Because of you I walk in light and hear you call my weary soul to life. Because of you mercy flows. Because of you I'm not alone. Because of you I now know love. All is done that must be done. Because of you I've tasted peace. Because of you I know release. Because of you. Though life is a struggle, and I stumble all the way, you'll never leave me, and your love will remain. Shadows fade in your light, and in your joy I have strength. And I'm amazed because of you. Thank you guys so much.